All right. Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive.
Always exciting to be back for another one.
Yeah, so today we're going deeper than Hollywood.
Yeah.
You know, we always talk about the movies and stuff.
Yeah.
But we're diving into some real deal military stuff today.
Right.
We've got the Black Shark Den TAC SOP Rev 6.03.
Okay.
This is the Tactical Standard Operating Procedures for a Virtual Helicopter Squadron. So these are people who are like in simulators, but they're using real-world tactics.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating because this document, it's not just for like a video game, you know?
Yeah.
These are actual real-world tactics, communication protocols,
Right.
like really detailed contingency plans.
Oh, yeah. It's like incredibly detailed.
Yeah, it gives you a glimpse into the level of planning and precision that goes into actual military operations.
Yeah, it's not just theoretical. It's like they're really thinking this through.
Absolutely.
And I was really kind of blown away by how in-depth this TAC SOP is. It breaks down everything from helicopter rules and formations, to night ops, shipboard landings, even what to do if you lose communication, which I thought was really interesting.
Oh, yeah, critical.
So it's like a crash course in helicopter warfare
Yeah.
that way more engaging than, sitting there with like a dry military manual.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's written for pilots by pilots, so it's very much a practical guide.
Okay, well, so let's get into it then.
Okay.
One of the first things that they lay out are the helicopter roles.
Okay.
And, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Like every, military operation needs specialization.
Of course, yeah. I mean, you can't have everyone doing the same thing.
Right. You need people with different skill sets and different equipment.
Right.
So they outline four main roles.
Right.
Attack, cargo transport, observation, and then lift utility.
Okay, got it.
So let's start with attack helicopters, because that's what everybody, thinks about when they think military helicopters.
Right. Firepower.
Yeah.
Pew, pew, pew. All right.
Pew, pew, pew. Exactly.
But they're not just about offense.
This TAC SOP points out that they can also conduct air assault as a secondary task.
Oh, interesting.
What do you think are the tactical implications of that?
Well, I mean, think about it. You need to get troops on the ground quickly, maybe behind enemy lines.
Yeah.
Having an attack helicopter that can also transport troops.
Yeah.
It gives you that kind of flexibility.
Speed and agility.
Absolutely. So it's not just about firepower. It's about being adaptable.
Right, and responding quickly to a changing situation.
Exactly.
So that's really interesting to me. Okay, so then we've got the observation helicopters, which they very aptly describe as the eyes in the sky.
Yeah, they're essentially providing that critical intel to commanders.
Yeah, because you can't make good decisions if you don't know what's going on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Situational awareness is key in any military operation.
So those observation helicopters, they're feeding that information back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where's the enemy? What are they doing? What are their capabilities?
Right, and that can really make or break a mission.
Absolutely. Without that information, you're flying blind.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's like trying to play chess without seeing the board.
That's a good analogy.
So yeah, they're absolutely critical.
Okay, so we've talked about a couple of the roles, but before any of these helicopters even take off,
right?
There's a huge emphasis on mission planning.
Oh, yeah.
In this TAC SOP.
Good reason.
And I thought that was really interesting because even though this is a virtual environment, they're still taking this preparation very seriously. Absolutely.
And I think that speaks volumes about the mindset of, these folks who are really dedicated to this.
Right. They're not just messing around. They're really trying to simulate real world conditions.
Yeah. And, they lay out different planning timelines.
Okay.
So like a minimal one for quick reaction missions.
Right. Like if you got to scramble.
Exactly. And then a more deliberate timeline for, more complex scenarios.
Got it. So if it's something like a big air assault or something.
Yeah, exactly.
They're going to take more time.
Take more time, make sure everything's in place.
And that's just, the meticulous planning is just a hallmark of military operations in general.
Yeah, you can't just hop in a helicopter and expect to pull off a successful mission.
Right.
There are so many factors to consider,
Coordination,
clear objectives, understanding the terrain,
right?
Potential threats. All of that needs to be carefully planned out.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good takeaway for anybody, even if you're not in the military, just thinking about how important planning is to any endeavor.
Absolutely.
Okay, so speaking of communication, the TATSOSTIC dedicates a lot of space to brevity codes.
Oh, yeah, those are critical.
And it's clear that, in the fast-paced world of helicopter warfare, clear and concise communication is absolutely essential.
Yes, seconds can make all the difference.
So can you elaborate a little bit on how these codes actually help
Well, think of it like this. Brevity codes are essentially shorthand terms that pilots use to minimize radio chatter
Right.
and to really enhance that situational awareness.
So instead of saying we are changing our position
Yeah.
over the radio,
Yeah.
they would just say moving.
Exactly.
Oh.
And to confirm that a formation is in place, they'd say saddle.
Got it.
It's all about conveying that critical information quickly and efficiently.
Yeah, so everyone's on the same page, literally in the same airspace.
Exactly. And that's so important when you're flying in close formation.
You want to have any misunderstandings.
Not at all.
All right, so let's move on to something that always looks super impressive in the movies. Formation flying.
Oh, yeah.
This TAC-SOP goes into detail about the various formations. Trail, staggered, echelon, V formation.
Right, all the classics.
Yeah, and what I find interesting is that it's not just about looking cool,
No.
like in Top Gun or something.
Right, it's not just about the aesthetics.
Each formation serves a very specific purpose.
Absolutely tactical advantages.
Right. You talk about tight formation, where helicopters are only 2 rotor discs apart.
Wow.
I can only imagine the precision and trust required for that.
Yeah, that's incredible skill and coordination.
Yeah, so you're literally like right next to another helicopter.
Yeah. It's about minimizing your profile.
Yeah.
Reducing the risk of detection or, maybe presenting a more concentrated force when you're engaging a target.
Makes sense.
But it's not always about being so close.
Okay.
There's also combat cruise formation that allows for more spacing between the helicopters.
So that's more about flexibility.
Exactly. Gives the pilots a little bit more freedom to maneuver.
Right.
Leverage the terrain maybe for cover and concealment.
So it's really about adapting the formation to the situation.
No, absolutely.
It's not just flying in a straight line.
Right.
It's about, being dynamic.
Exactly. Making those adjustments on the fly.
And that takes a lot of skill.
And communication. Don't forget those brevity codes. They come into play big time.
All right, because you got to let your wingman know what you're doing.
Exactly.
All right, so we've covered, the roles, the planning, the communication formations. Now it's time to get into, the really exciting part.
Okay, the nitty-gritty.
The actual tactics and procedures.
Let's do it.
That are covered in this TAC-SOP.
This is where we really see the strategy and the thought that goes into, every aspect of helicopter warfare.
Yeah, it's like chess in the sky.
It really is. Yeah, they've got a range of tactical maneuvers, each designed to maximize effectiveness and survivability in combat.
Okay, so one tactic that really stood out to me was bounding overwatch.
Okay.
Which is basically a technique for moving safely through hostile territory.
Right. So can you break that down for us? Sure. It's like a carefully choreographed leapfrog. One helicopter provides cover while the other one advances.
Okay.
So it minimizes your exposure to enemy fire.
So they're like watching each other's backs as they move through dangerous territory.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it's all about mutual support.
I like that analogy.
And the beauty of bounding overwatch is it can be adapted
to
different terrains and situations.
Okay, that makes sense. So then what about when they actually encounter the enemy?
Right.
What are the actions on contact that are outlined?
Okay, so this is about reacting quickly and decisively.
Right.
When you know something unexpected happens.
Right. You don't have time to plan at that point.
Exactly. It's about assessing the threat.
Right.
Communicating effectively and choosing the best course of action.
So it's not just about immediately firing back.
Right. It's not always the best option.
You have to consider the situation and make a smart decision.
Yeah, sometimes a hasty reaction can actually put you in a worse position.
Right. So you got to think tactically.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. I'm curious about the aerial escort TTPs.
Okay.
What are the challenges involved in protecting other aircraft or ground units from a helicopter?
Well, think of it as being like a flying bodyguard. Sometimes you're flying ahead, clearing a path.
Right.
Other times you're providing that close-in protection, constantly scanning for threats.
That sounds really intense.
Yeah, it's high pressure.
So you have to be very aware.
Yeah, communication is key and being able to anticipate potential threats and react accordingly.
Yeah, because if you're escorting something, you got to be ready for anything.
Exactly. You're the first line of defense.
Okay, so this TAC-SOP doesn't shy away from some of the more challenging aspects of helicopter operations.
Right.
There's a whole section dedicated to night ops.
Oh, yeah.
And shipboard landings.
Those are tough.
Both of which obviously present unique risks.
Definitely.
So what makes night operations so much more difficult than flying during the day?
Well, you have reduced visibility, right?
Right.
You're relying on instruments and night vision technology.
Yeah.
And there's an increased risk of disorientation.
Oh, wow. So it's not just about seeing in the dark.
Right, it's a whole different ballgame.
You have to really trust your instruments.
Yeah, and maintain your composure.
Because I can imagine that could be pretty terrifying.
Oh, absolutely, especially in a combat environment.
Yeah, where there are people potentially shooting at you.
Exactly.
You can't really see them.
Right.
And then there are shipboard landings.
Oh, boy.
Was, landing on a moving platform.
Yeah, in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah, it just seems inherently nerve-wracking.
It takes a lot of skill and practice, that's for sure.
So the document emphasizes the specialized training and equipment needed for those kinds of operations.
Yeah, they really highlight the need for precise timing, coordination with the ship's crew.
Right, you got to be talking to those guys.
Absolutely. And then the ability to adjust to sudden changes.
Oh, yeah.
In wind and sea conditions.
I can't even imagine.
It's like landing on a roller coaster.
It sounds pretty intense.
But those pilots who can handle those kinds of landings?
Yeah.
They're the best of the best.
They're at the top of their game.
Absolutely.
What really stood out to me about this TADSCABA was the emphasis on contingency planning.
Yeah.
It's clear that they're always anticipating the unexpected.
Oh, it's going to have a plan B.
Right, and sometimes a plan C and D.
Exactly.
So in the unpredictable world of helicopter operations, you always have to be prepared for things to go wrong.
Absolutely.
And the document lays out procedures for dealing with a wide range of contingencies.
Yeah, everything from, loss of communication to encountering bad weather.
Right.
Engine failure, you name it.
I was particularly struck by the lost commo procedures.
Okay.
What happens when communication fails in a hostile environment?
Oh, that's scary stuff.
That seems like a recipe for disaster.
It can be incredibly dangerous. Yeah.
So what do?
Well, the procedures in the TACSOP, they provide a framework, for maintaining situational awareness, coordinating actions, and ultimately rejoining the team or completing the mission as safely as possible.
But without being able to talk to each other.
Right. It's all about pre-planned procedures and signals.
Wow. That must be incredibly stressful for the pilots.
Oh, yeah. It's a test of their training and their mental fortitude, for sure.
Yeah, because you have to rely on those procedures and make decisions without being able to communicate.
Right. You're basically on your own until you can reestablish contact.
Wow, that's intense.
It is. Yeah, it's a testament to the level of training these pilots undergo.
Okay, and then you have inadvertent IMC recovery procedures.
Right.
Which is what you do if you accidentally fly into bad weather and lose visibility.
Which can happen.
Yeah, I can only imagine how terrifying that would be.
Oh, absolutely. Especially if you're, flying low.
Yeah.
Suddenly you're surrounded by clouds. You can't see anything.
It's like driving into fog.
Yeah. It's a recipe for disorientation.
Sensory overload.
Exactly. Those procedures are all about regaining control.
Okay.
Transitioning to instrument flight and getting back to clear conditions as quickly and safely as possible.
Wow. So it's really interesting to see how much thought and preparation goes into every aspect of these helicopter operations.
Absolutely. It's all about mitigating risk.
And this TACSOP really underscores the skill, the training, the mental toughness required of these pilots.
Oh, yeah. It's not a job for everyone, that's for sure.
It takes a special kind of person.
Absolutely.
I think one of the things that's really impressed me is how much emphasis they put on teamwork.
Oh, yeah.
Adaptability and clear communication.
Those are the cornerstones of success in any military operation.
Right. And even with all the advanced technology and training that we have today, it's still ultimately the human factor.
Absolutely.
The ability to think critically, to make decisions under pressure.
To work together as a team.
It makes the difference.
It's what separates the good from the great.
Right. So even in these, really sophisticated machines, it's still the human element that's paramount.
Couldn't agree more.
So we've learned a lot about these different roles and this planning and the communication.
Yeah, I've barely scratched the surface.
Right. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of helicopter tactical operations, I'm left with a question for our listeners.
Okay.
This document talks about procedures for accidentally flying into bad weather. And we talked about how disorienting that can be.
Right.
But how do you even begin to train for something like that?
That's a really good question.
Right. Like, how do you prepare yourself for suddenly losing visibility?
Yeah. When you're hundreds of feet in the air.
Yeah.
It must take a lot of mental conditioning.
Yeah, it's something to think about.
Definitely.
So we'll leave you with that question to ponder.
Keep those brains working.
And if this deep dive has gotten you interested in helicopter tactics and operations, we encourage you to go out and learn more.
There are so many resources out there.
Yeah, it's a fascinating subject. All right, so thanks for joining us on this deep dive into helicopter tactical operations.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, stay curious, everybody.